Hey, Dylan Fry, the real estate guy, here to be your guy for any need or real estate needs in the Kansas City area. Today, we're going to switch things up a little bit. We're going to do one of our weekly interviews, but today I'm going to be your guy. We're going to go through some questions about the real estate market, what's going on in it, how I can help you avoid bad situations. And I've got Ricky on here. He's with Moss Marketing Group. He's going to go through some questions that they have just to make sure that we get the best information out there to you guys. If this is your first time to the channel, make sure that you hit that follow button, subscribe to the channel so that you'll get all these weekly interviews as well as the other tips and tricks that we're teaching you about the real estate market in the Kansas City area, as well as some neighborhood outlines and other information. Let's get into it. Ricky, how you want to start it off?
Yeah, man. First off, I'm happy to be here. We're flipping the script a little bit. I think that was an excellent idea. So I'm excited to pull some of that real estate knowledge for your listeners. So very excited about that. But first, I want to give a little bit of your background, kind of how you started in real estate, how you grew up, what you were doing before this. I know you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to give the listeners a chance to relate with that.
Yeah. So my background, I've been in sales since I was 18. Right after I got out of high school, was going to college at Mo West, St. Joe, Missouri. And then I ended up getting linked up with an insurance agency and came in. It was a new market opportunity, went in, learned all of my sales practices, learned how to talk to people and everything like that. I really take that back to, I used to work in a grocery store, and that's where I learned a lot of my personal development skills and how to interact with people. And then went into insurance. From there, I opened my own agency 2 years after that at 20 years old. And then 3 years into that, I decided to leave State Farm. Well, didn't really have a decision. I ended up, it's a pretty rough situation where they came in and said, hey, there was some things going on at your old agency and that you used to be with, and there's nothing wrong with your agency and hasn't been over the last 3 years, but we are going to terminate your contract. So I ended up having to walk away from a agency that I had built, team members that I had and that I treated like family and really took care of. So it was a pretty rough situation. So fast forward, that happened. Then I decided, hey, I'm going to stay in insurance, and opened a Goosehead Insurance Agency in Kearney, Missouri. And that's how I ended up getting linked up with the real estate guys, is because I ended up opening it in the RE/MAX office. And the agent the first day was like, hey, just get your license. I can already tell you'd love this side. I was like, no, insurance is what I know. I'm going to do this. And I don't know about you. Have you ever had a situation where you get essentially kicked out of the group or anything?
Nothing comes to mind quite like that scenario, but I can't imagine that was an easy thing to go through.
No, it wasn't. And it left a bad taste in my mouth for insurance. So for the first year I had that agency, I really struggled to want to do it. And it was pretty hard.
Especially after you've already gone through that pain of building it the first time.
Yeah. And that was one of those things where now I'm back to the grind. I'm doing different things. Basically everybody I knew and had talked to over the last 3 years and helped build a business, I didn't have the same relationships with anymore. And so it was really hard. And I didn't have my team that I had built processes around. And I hit it right here.
Okay. I'm going to, here, real quick. Let's pause right there. We'll just make sure everything's nice. So you had built processes the first time you built the agency, obviously, because that's what led you to that success.
Yeah. And so I built processes and a team that worked really well together and everything. And then I no longer had that team or any of those processes. And I was in a new agency. And I resented what I was doing. Totally. So it was a little bit wild for a little while. And then the whole time I was doing that, my wife's like, just get your license. Just get your license. You like the guys in the office. Like, why don't you just do it? And I had done multiple flips over the previous 5 years with my dad, and we had bought and sold houses. So I really like that side of it and being able to connect people, connect buyers with sellers and sellers with buyers, and make sure that everyone's maximizing their potential. So fast forward, I decided to sell the insurance agency and then I got my real estate license a little bit before that, started to see how it went, fell in love with it. I've got a finance background. So I love helping people figure out how to accomplish their goals. That's what I originally wanted to do in life, was become a financial planner so I could help people build their retirement plans, their legacy plans, everything like that. And now I'm doing it with the biggest asset that most people are going to make in their lifetime, the biggest investment. And I'm helping them and giving them education on how do we make this a good investment. And that's how I ended up in real estate.
And there's not very many people that are doing that, at least from my perspective. There's a lot of agents out there that just want to sell you a house. Yeah. You're actually looking out for their future interests as well.
Well, one big thing that I've always held with me is that this business is a karma business. Mm-hmm. So if you take really good care of people, then they'll take really good care of you. Last weekend, I went down to $1 Million Mastermind, and it was hosted by Apex and Ryan Stewman. And one of the big takeaways I took from every speaker that got up there and spoke was, be your true self and the things will come to you. So that is one thing that I've struggled with over the last couple of years is, who am I? Because I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this company, and then they just came out and said, hey, I can't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
And that tears you down quite a bit. And it was hard to come back from that. So now I just even over this weekend, being there down there and listening to these different speakers and the things that they'd went through and the different hardships that they've had in their life, it's like, you're not really alone. So get over yourself.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where hanging out with the investor that I was with, one of the big things that he kept saying, he was like, man, Dylan really loves his family. I've got a wife and 4 kids, and I missed the hell out of them the whole time I was down there. And that's the thing that I want to be known for is, hey, I'm taking really good care of my family. I'm also helping a bunch of other people. I do a lot of coaching as well. So that's the legacy that I want to leave behind, is educating people and helping them achieve their greatest self.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you expected it to. Like when you originally thought you were going to be a financial planner, obviously not doing that right now, but still able to help people financially through a different vehicle of assistance there, which is extremely cool.
Correct. And this vehicle is the one that has made the most millionaires in the world.
Very true.
So it is one of my favorite things to do, is just talk to people about their home purchase or their home sale, and make sure that we get in, or that we make sure that we capitalize on whatever's available to them and get them the most value, or get them the perfect home so that they can go in and have their family or whatever they're looking to do inside the house.
I love that. Well, let's get into some questions then.
Yeah.
I've got a little bit of a list here, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the first one off. Wanted to make a list so we don't miss anything.
I appreciate that.
What are some of the most common misconceptions people have when it comes to buying or selling a home, and how can they avoid falling into those traps?
So I think the biggest misconception that people have when it comes to buying or selling a home is that it is difficult, but there's a lot of things that we can do to make it easier. So everyone thinks that buying a home is this super hard process, and it is. It's stressful. There's a lot of things that go into it, but that stress is what adds a lot of that, where people are like, oh my gosh, this is so difficult, because they don't have a clear outline. And if you're doing anything that is a longer term sale, you have to make sure that you give people an outline. So one thing I talk to people about is, hey, what we need is about, I can get you pre-approval in about 3 days, but and make sure that it's an actual pre-approval. They've ran everything and you're good to go. It doesn't matter. We're going to make this happen as long as you don't quit your job and stuff like that. So we get that. Then we look at houses. That can take anywhere from 1 day to 30 days to 6 months to a full year. It just depends on what people want in a house and how particular they are about it. And then once we find that house, you got to be thinking 30 to 60 days. That is 30 to 60 days. Once we found that house, we make an offer. If it gets accepted, that now we're on a 30-day time crunch. Okay, first week, we're doing inspections. We've got 10 days to do that. We knock those out. I try to do them in the first 2 days of the contract, because then if we need any supplemental inspections, we just go ahead and get those. And then once we've done the inspection and let's say, hey, we're moving forward with this. Awesome. Then you're going to have the appraisal. Now, the appraisal I've had happen in the first 10 days. I've had it happen in the second 10 days, and I've had it happen in the last 10 days. You really don't know when that appraisal is going to come through. They normally have a deadline, but you never know how busy appraisers are. So the next spot is that appraisal. Once we have that appraisal back, if we get it early, there's going to be a dead period where nothing is happening in this home. And that's what freaks people out, is they're like, are we still buying the house?
Like, what's going on?
Correct. Because they don't know what they don't know, and they haven't seen this process. And that's one thing where you just have to send reminders like, hey, everything's still going good. We're still going to be able to close on this date, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes we can move it up if we need to, but a lot of times once a house is under contract, it's harder to move it up.
Yeah.
Because now they've scheduled movers and everything like that. So you just have to remember at some point, whether the appraisal is in the beginning or towards the end, there's going to be this lull where nobody knows what's going on. So don't panic. And then once you get that appraisal and you're in the last week, things are going to happen really fast. So now I'm saying, hey, call and turn on your utilities. Make sure those things are ready. We're going to schedule closing. You should schedule your movers the first week after you get through inspections. Make sure you schedule those movers. But hey, make sure that double check with your movers. Make sure everything's good there. We're going to talk through times. We're going to go do a final walkthrough. That last week is the most hectic, and that's when you're getting how much you need to bring to closing and everything like that. So just be prepared that last week you're going to have so much information thrown at you. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
I love it. And I feel like if you're working with an agent that's not very experienced, they're not going to know to comfort you through those times and give you that outline of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because you've seen it a million times, whereas this could be their first home purchase. They have no idea about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So be able to guide them through that, I mean, that's huge.
And that is one thing that I think people lose in general. One thing I picked up this weekend was by Bobby Castro. Mm-hmm. He talked about PMA, which is a positive mental attitude. And that's one thing that I think in any industry is people get a negative mental attitude because they do this job every single day. They don't realize that the people that they're working with don't have any clue what they're doing. And then there's that communication gap where they're like, well, you should just know this. And you have to be able to illustrate that correctly. If you're gonna help anybody with any kind of process, you've got to realize they don't do this for every day. And it's your job to inform them on how this goes.
And that applies to any industry. Same with us. Yeah. Like, it's the first time we're working with somebody, we got to remember, oh, hey, this could be their first time working with a marketing agency. Ours operates a lot different, so we need to help walk them through that process.
Well, and people don't know what they don't know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. All right. Question number 2. Many people believe that they should always wait for the perfect market conditions before buying or selling. What advice would you give to those who are hesitant because they fear they might miss out on a better deal in the future? So they're hearing everything. Everybody is saying their opinion on their market. They're thinking, oh, should I wait? Maybe it'll go down. Maybe it'll go up. Nobody really knows what to do. What kind of information would you give people like that?
So I'll take this back to my economics background. What's the opportunity cost? Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to wait, okay, what situation are you in now? Do you have 2 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment and and they're getting older and you're like, hey, we really need more space, and it's stressing you out? One big thing that it doesn't matter where the market goes, it's on a trajectory that's up. So you're going to make money back on your home as long as you stay there a decent amount of time. Yeah. And you're not like, in there 3 months and then you turn around and sell it. Then you may lose some money, but it's still unlikely. But the opportunity cost of your mental health, I mean, you have to make sure that, hey, I have a big enough house for you. Now, if you're buying a house on a want, that's a different story. Then, yeah, play the market, let the market come wherever you want, and then make that purchase. But if you're buying a house on a need, which is majority of the situations that I see on a daily basis in real estate, it's a need situation. They're moving school districts because they want to get their kids in a different school district. They're going through divorce, or they're getting married and they need a bigger house. They just had another kid and they've ran out of space. Their kids are getting older and they want them on a different level, and so that they have a little bit more peace to themselves. Or they need maybe their job, they need an office space because now they're working from home all the time. There's so many things that come into it, and you have to think, what's the opportunity cost? Because you living stressed for that next, nobody knows what's going on in the market. Like that's one thing with, we were talking when we were in the hotel the other day, they were like, oh, how do you predict this stuff? And I was like, nobody really knows what's going to happen. Like everybody's got an opinion and everybody's got research that's to back up their statements, but you can find research to back up both sides. So at the end of the day, you have to figure out, what do you need? And then ultimately, what do you want? And what's going to make the best situation for you and your family? And then if you find something that you really like, and go do it. I mean, interest rates are the big thing that is the talk right now, is they're high. They're going to go back down eventually. Don't marry the rate, marry the house. You hear that all the time. Don't marry the rate, marry the house. So find that house that you want, figure out what the opportunity cost is if you don't buy it now. And if that opportunity cost is not high enough for you to make that purchase now, then don't do it. If that opportunity cost is getting high and you know that this other situation would put you in a better mental space and make you happier, pull the trigger.
I love it. Yeah, a lot of people have a really hard time committing to something like that, and they take in almost too much information instead of just finding somebody they trust to get their information from.
Yeah.
They're trying to listen to everybody, and everybody has a different opinion, so they're stuck in this weird middle ground where they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and I think I heard this on your guys' podcast there last week. I think Madison was speaking about it, and she was like, now's the best time to buy.
Yeah.
The houses aren't going up. Like,
less competition.
There's less competition. There's so much going on but the reason there's less competition, the reason houses aren't going up, is because mass media is telling you, hey, this is a terrible time to buy. And the people that are like, I'm still going to pull the trigger, they're going to reap the rewards when the market does start to go back up.
Oh, yeah. Normally, do it when everybody else isn't doing it. Seems to be a good advice for sure. Number 3, what are some key factors that potential home buyers should consider beyond the price and location of a property? Obviously, those are two very big things, but what else should they be considering other than the obvious ones?
Yeah, price and location are two things. Like, you got to know what you can afford, and then you got to be in an area that you want to be in. The other things that I would say is think of a house as from bottom to top. So you want to make sure the foundation is in good shape. That's first and foremost. You don't want a house that's going to fall in on you in 3 months or 3 years. Then you want to make sure that the main features are taken care of. So what I'm talking about is like your AC units, heating units, anything inside the house that is a bigger expense. So anything that when you're talking to people, I always say make sure you get an inspection, especially in our market now because there's not as much competition. Get the inspection, and then go through those big ticket items and make sure that they're well maintained and that they're taken care of and that they're not going to be a huge expense. And if they are going to, like, if you run into a house and it's got an older unit, there's a chance that unit could probably last another 15 years.
Those older ones are built different.
Yeah, it is built different. So don't get discouraged by that. Just appropriate the funds. So if it went out next week, you got to make sure that you're ready for that. If you think that it's something that could go out, but you're not certain that it's going to, and you don't really think you have the money on it, get a home warranty plan. Like, there's options out there. You just got to be able to talk to your agent. The third thing is make sure that that roof is in good shape too, because that's one thing that a lot of roofers will do. I've got people in my pocket that'll do it. Go out, do a roof inspection. They'll actually crawl around on top of it, make sure there's no leaks, make sure there's nothing, no granular loss. They can also save you thousands of dollars, because once you switch ownership, now any previous damage, and most insurance companies are going to send somebody out there to take pictures once you buy the home. Once you've signed that document, any granular loss due to hail or anything that's prior to that is not going to be covered on your new policy. So you just have to think about that.
So if you're just doing the eyeball test and like, all right, looks good, correct, and then you have a hailstorm come in the week you move there, chances are that's not going to get covered by insurance if it was.
So if there's a valid hailstorm, but here's a situation where I would say that you're going to have an issue with it, is when you have you buy the home, then you move into it, and 2 days later you notice that there's a drip coming from the ceiling. There hasn't been a storm. Now you call your insurance company and say, hey, we want to file a claim because our roof's leaking. And they're like, there hasn't been any storms. And you're like, well, it's leaking. And then you're mad because you're like, hey, it wasn't leaking. This is the first storm that they've had or whatever. And they're like, we didn't have any hail damage. This roof was already damaged. They're not going to pay for it.
Gotcha.
So you want to make sure you take that into consideration. And sometimes it's not leaking and that first storm gets it. I had a situation where that happened in the first month of somebody owning a house. That's why if you do that roof inspection, it's something that you're concerned about, get the home warranty plan.
Awesome.
So.
One common misconception that it's always better to buy rather than rent. Can you shed some light on the factors that individuals should consider when deciding whether to rent or buy a home?
I think the biggest factor is, well, what we talked about a little bit earlier, is that interest rates is the bigger driver of why people are fearful to buy right now. The interest rates are high. I used to ask this question to people all the time, and I swear it does relate to this question. What's the death rate in Missouri? Do you know what it is?
I don't.
Do you know what the death rate in Kentucky is?
I guess eventually it would always be 100%, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
It's 100%. Rent is the same way. It's always 100% interest. So therefore, if you choose to rent, you are giving your money to whoever that rent or whoever that landlord is, and you're never seeing it again. So why does it matter what interest rates are today? It doesn't. Because even if you can get a lower or a similar payment, or say it's even a little bit higher, and get into a similar quality house, why would you not go ahead and make that purchase? Because even if you're paying 6, 7, somebody talked about, hey, it may get up to 8. Even if you're paying that, why would you pay 100% interest instead of 7 or 8? And now you have an asset that, if you hold it long enough, it's going to appreciate. That's the thing about real estate. It always appreciates. And everybody's saying, hey, are we going to go back to where we were? That's one thing that doesn't happen, is real estate. If you talk to your grandparents, your parents, there's drastic shifts in the real estate market. It goes up really, really fast, and then it stays there. And then it may come down just a hair, 5% maybe, and then eventually it goes back up really, really quickly. And because I know back when my dad was in school, he was like, oh, we could have bought an acre for $200. And I'm like, cool. You ain't buying nothing.
Yeah, you should have bought it.
Yeah, you ain't buying nothing for under $6,800 now.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because like when we look through Zillow listings and stuff like that, and we see like the history of the prices, and we see that jump that it made, was it from around 19 to 21, that massive jump?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, dang, I missed out. Well, you did if you weren't in the market, but also that doesn't matter. Like, it's going to do the same thing again eventually.
Correct. Correct. And I would caution people, that's one misconception that I think that using those, I'm not going to use specifics names on it, but using those estimates from different websites, don't always hold those true. Because what I do is when I come in and I'm going to list your home, I'm going to bring you empirical data, which what that means is I'm going to bring you people that have sold their houses that are similar to yours, similar neighborhood, or your specific neighbors, and give you a price based on that. That takes a radius and everything else, and it's got a confidence score, and there's all kinds of stuff. There's a company out there that lost a ton of money that still advertises those, but they jumped right back out of the real estate business because it costs them thousands and thousands and thousands of millions of dollars. They're one of the biggest companies out there that puts out an estimate. You guys, if you do the research, you'll know who I'm talking about. But don't use those as, oh, my agent doesn't know anything he's doing, because the estimate online tells me, hey, my house is worth $360,000 and he's telling me it's worth $330,000. All they're looking at is square footage, neighborhood, style of house. And there's a few other factors that go into it. And the agent's going to look at, well, is your house updated? Do you have anything going on in it? Is there any issues that are inside the house? Does the access to the basement in the garage, or is it in the house? I had that situation here recently. How big's the garage? Is the garage smaller or bigger? And there's so many things that can go into that. And how big's the lot? Like that plays a big factor into it. Is it a clean lot? Is it a corner lot? There's so many things that play into how to price a home. A lot of times the professionals are going to bring you, I'm not saying don't use those estimates, because sometimes we use them for a baseline. And we look at the confidence scores and everything that's on there. And then we're like, hey, let's see if we can validate this. But at the end of the day, I have to be able to validate the price that we sold your house to an appraiser. So if I don't have empirical data to back that up, I would advise you not to list it at that.
So people need to treat the estimates as exactly that, an estimate, just a broad place to start from until you actually get the help of a professional.
Correct.
I love it. Cool. I think we covered that one. Are there any specific legal or financial aspects that buyers and sellers often misunderstand during the process of a real estate transaction? Is there some common things that people get tripped up on, thinking one thing means something else, things like that?
Yeah, I would say that sometimes here's one big thing that a lot of times comes into play, and it's earnest money. And I always tell people, take earnest money with a grain of salt, because most of the contracts that are out there protect the buyers. A lot of, especially if you're doing any kind of government loans, they protect the heck out of the buyers, and they have outs to where they can get their earnest money back. So I've had situations where people are like, hey, we really want $5,000 earnest on this deal. And I'm like, well, that's cool and all, and it looks good on paper, but what does it actually do? It doesn't do anything for you, because at the end of the day, unless they have a breach in the contract, you can't keep that money. And then even if they do have a breach in that contract, are you going to take them to court? Now, I'm not a real estate attorney. I have a good one that I use all the time, and I would send you to him for advice. Maybe you want to fight it. I just, sometimes there's, again, that opportunity cost that comes into it, to where it's like, is that earnest really important? And how easy is it going to be able to get it? And then what's going to be the cost of being able to keep that? Now, sometimes people, I've had a situation where a guy backed out the day before closing.
Oh, man.
And he was like, keep the earnest money. I just can't move forward with the deal. Okay. Like, at that point, he had a breach in the contract because he had agreed to buy it. And we kept the earnest money. We went back on the market. We ended up getting more money. It's weird how this is a karma business. Like, if you do good things and you treat people well, then it comes back tenfold.
And I think that applies to every industry, but especially real estate.
Yeah.
So earnest money is essentially money put up that if the deal falls through, it goes to the seller.
Yes. Yes, that's how it's perceived.
Okay.
And there's just so many things, because like if somebody backs out in the inspection period, then it goes back to the buyer.
Okay.
If the appraisal is short, then it goes back to the buyer. And nobody wants to say, hey, I did this, or I came up with all these things. But if you've ever seen an inspection report, you can make an inspection report read however you want it to. So because they're going to find things wrong with these houses.
Yeah.
So if, say, somebody goes in there, they have buyer's remorse, and they find these things wrong with their houses, they're going to send us a laundry list if they really don't want to buy this house. And I'm going to come to you and say, hey, you can fix all of these things, and then they still have to buy the house. And then you say at almost every time, I'm not fixing all those things. And you say, okay, well, then we're going to have to send it back to them, and if they still want to move forward, and then you'll get the cancellation of the contract, and they'll say, hey, we want to back out. And then at that point in time, you're obligated to, per our contracts, to give the money back.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So how can potential home buyers navigate the often complex and overwhelming process of obtaining a mortgage? And what are some common misconceptions about mortgage financing? Because I think a lot of people just assume that's a really complicated process, and it probably doesn't have to be as complicated as one would assume.
No, it's super easy. And I would encourage you first, if you really have questions about lending, watch our interview with Ammon Dorsey with Leader One Financial. And he explains it a lot better than I do. But one of the big things is all it takes is an application. Mm-hmm. They're going to pull credit and other things, and then you're going to have to verify anything you put on that application. So if you put, I make this much money, you're going to have to verify that. So what you need is your W-2s and last two pay stubs. And then they're going to want to know how much money can you put down. So you need last 60-day bank statements. If you have any big cash deposits, make sure you have an explanation of those. Those are some things that trip it up. And then those are the main things that you need to be able to get an approval. Then once we get the approval, or the pre-approval, we can go start looking at houses. That process is fairly easy. And I would say you can shop rates, but at the end of the day, make sure that, one, you trust that person. Two, your agent trusts that person, because that's one thing. I have a deal right now that is going on, and I am playing heck to try to get a hold of the lending agency, because they don't return phone calls. I've got to wait on hold forever. And it's different with like mortgage brokers I'm used to working with. I just have them. I can text them and say, hey, do we have this yet? Do I need to get anything? And I will get messages from this other lending agency that says, or from my clients that say, hey, they sent us this and they need this. And I'm like, why didn't they email me? And so there's those situations that I try to prevent with people, is like, hey, we want to make sure this is the smoothest transaction for you. So make sure you have people working together that do this all the time. And aside of that, the mortgage side of it is super, super smooth. And maybe that's just because I have people that take really good care of me. Most of it's really smooth. I actually had my mortgage license for a while and pushed a lot of loans through, and back with the company that I was with. And it's one of those things where you have to explain it to people how it's going to work, what the timelines are, but it's the same timelines I gave you. And earlier on in the podcast is you've got the first 10 days. I'm normally holding an appraisal until I get through inspections. So whether that's 2 days or 5 days or 10 days, I'm telling my lender, hey, don't order that appraisal because I don't want you to have that cost. And then once the appraisal is back, as long as they've verified all your documents up front, you're good to go.
Awesome. Yeah. So I feel like working with somebody that your agent trusts, one, because that should be the first thing you're worried about. It's not your perception of them. If the agent says if you trust your agent first and foremost, and then they trust the vendor, then it's probably a good bet. And that's going to lead to a lot smoother transaction than trying to save 0.5%. And then who knows, you might miss out on a house altogether because it just doesn't work smoothly.
Correct. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to save money, I can work with anybody. It's just, there's going to be that friction that you may have. And I always forewarn people like, hey, if it's a company that I haven't worked with, I've never worked with them, I don't know how their loan process works, we'll get through this, but bear with me if anything comes up. We're going to make sure that we take care of it.
Love it. When it comes to selling a home, what are some effective strategies sellers can employ to ensure their property stands out in a competitive market? What can I do to make my house stand out?
Yeah. So one big thing is get it professionally cleaned. And I try to do this with all my listings, is get somebody in there to professionally clean it before photos. Professionally clean the carpets. It makes it look so much better in a house. And then get professional photos. If you can do those three things, and obviously, like, there's a huge misconception out there that if I price my home high, I can always come down. Well, one of the biggest things this last boom did for people that try that method is they killed it, because now the Zillows, the Realtor.coms, and everything like that, they send you that initial alert if you've got a safe search set up. And they see that house, and then you're looking through the pictures, and you're like, oh, my gosh, this doesn't look anything like the other $350,000 homes that I bought. And so you just send that to the trash, and so that you'll never see that house again. And then now, say 30 days in, you decide, or 10 days in, whatever it is, you decide, hey, we overpriced the house. We're going to price drop this. Well, now they've already sent that one to the trash. So any of those Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, whatever it is, they're not sending that back to that person because they've already said, hey, we don't want this. So now you've just lowered the amount of people that are going to be looking at your house. And anytime you're marketing anything, the more competition you have, the better price you're going to get. So really take that into account. Price your home right, and then do those extra things. Some other things that I do is send mailers to people that are in the area, because the biggest people that are going to help sell your house is your neighbors. You would be surprised how many people don't even know that their neighbor put their house up for sale. And they would be like, oh, man, I wish I would have known that. My mom's been wanting to move here for the last 6 months. And you'd be surprised how many times neighbors bring friends into a neighborhood.
I would imagine it happens all the time.
Every single day. Like, a lot of times, that's why people are moving in the neighborhood. So make sure everybody in the neighborhood knows that your house is for sale.
That sounds like an excellent place to start.
Yes, but you'd be surprised how many times it doesn't happen. I don't know how many open houses I've showed up to, because I've done a lot of open houses for other agents, and then I'll go door knock the neighborhood and say, hey, we're having an open house. And they're like, I didn't even know this house was for sale. And it's like, well, they're probably not watching the market. You would think that they're watching the market, or that they drove past the sign, but say, hey, they drove out of the neighborhood the other direction every day. They never see your sign. And if you don't have good pointer signs or anything like that, they don't even know a house is for sale in there. Yeah. So you want to make sure that everybody knows that your house is for sale. And you also want to make sure that you price it correctly the first time, so that you don't end up having to do, because it will cost you money. Because here's the situation. Let's say we list your house. I think your house is worth $330,000. I think that's the max that I could get out of it. And you think, hey, I can get $350,000. So I've done this in the past where they're like, hey, let's just meet in the middle and let's go $340,000. And I'm like, well, I still think that's a little bit high. And so we listed at $340,000. We have 0 showings the first weekend. Or we have 8 showings the first weekend, and every one of them says, it's too high. There's too much to do. and we're not interested. Now you've taken that level of excitement out of their voice. So, and the situation is they say, well, we're not interested. We're not interested. A week later, those same 10 people that came through the house, we just price dropped it to where I thought it was originally. So it's $330. And now they all see it and they're like, yeah, but there was a lot of things going on with that house. I don't really think that I want to do that. And so now they've already talked themselves out. So now we're doing another price drop the next week, $320. And then eventually we get to a state where somebody's like, oh, this is a deal. Like, and they come back in and they want to buy it. But now you have one buyer. And where if you look at the market, like, hey, I think it's worth $330. Let's list it at $330, or let's list it at $325, or whatever it is. Let's list it a little bit low. I like to list a little bit lower than what I think it's worth. One, because you don't want to overestimate again. And two, if you have that sense, we did this on a house last month, and we both sat there and we said, we think the best thing we can get out of this is about $290, $295. And he was like, well, let's like him and I discussed it back and forth and said, hey, we're going to list at $285. I said, I really want to get $300 out. And 2 days on the market, we got $300. We also got an appraisal waiver, and we got there was an inspections clause, and that was because we priced it a little bit low. The competitive market was there. And other agents aren't silly, or stupid is the word that I'm looking for. Other agents aren't stupid. So if they see that a house is priced low, now they're telling their buyers, hey, this house is priced low. So even if you don't have competition, you have the presence of competition. So it's where then they make it a very competitive offer because they want their client to win. And so that can benefit in your behavior or your situation as well, is just make sure that you price the house accordingly and get as many people in there as possible, get everybody knowing about it, do the steps to get it ready, replace the carpet if it needs replaced, fix any holes that need fixed, and then get it ready to show. You'll sell your house pretty quickly.
For more than if you didn't do those things, obviously.
Correct. Yeah, that's the big thing. Well, the thing is, one thing that everybody's talking about right now is houses are sitting longer. Mm-hmm. But the people that are still doing it the correct way and maintain that the whole time, they're still selling their houses really, really quickly.
I like it. So there's a lot of people out there that think they can save money by not hiring a real estate agent, and they just handle the buying and process. It's almost funny to even say the question, but they think they're going to save some money by handling it themselves, whether buying or selling. What are the potential risks and disadvantages of not working with a professional, whether buying or selling? Maybe we split those apart and talk about them separately.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the selling side first. If you are looking to save money on a realtor and you're looking at selling your house, most of the time, I think, what's the percentage? It's like 96% of houses in the nation are sold by or have a real estate agent involved in the transaction. So that's one misconception that people have, is that, hey, just because I'm not going to pay a realtor, I'm still going to pay this other realtor 3%. Okay. I'll pay the 3% or whatever it is that our commissions can be negotiated. Nothing is, but for fair numbers, I'm going to use the 3%. So they save 3% by not paying a selling realtor. Well, now this other realtor works for the buyer, and they know how this transaction should work. They know everything about this transaction. They're going to write the contract that favors their buyer. If you are really savvy with contracts and you know how to read them and everything like that, fair enough. But if you don't, that agent just did a service to their buyer by writing this contract to where now you have inspections. They're probably going to extend that inspection period. They're also probably going to put things in there that favor their buyer. And then when it comes back to it, they're going to renegotiate the heck out of you, because now they're negotiating with you directly, and they can there's things that you can do to pull on a seller's like, oh, well, we've already got this deal under contract. Like, let's just do this, blah, 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 blah. And you don't have anybody in there between you guys, like, to be a mediator. And that's a lot of what our job is to be a mediator so that you don't have to make abrupt decisions, because then you'll be like, oh, yeah, I'll do it. And then you'll sign the paperwork to say, hey, I'll fix these things. And at the end of the day, they were going to buy the house regardless. And you may have had other offers on the table. The other thing with selling is there's an opportunity cost of time. Is you now have signed up to show every single person that house. You've signed up to take every single phone call and text message on that house. You've also, if you put it out there on Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, you've signed up for every new agent in this industry to be calling you and harassing you to try to sell your listing. That's the biggest one of the three, is that's who you're marketing to right now. Because if you look and you go to the website, try to find a for sale by owner home. You have to click a specific button, and then it'll show you. Guess who clicks that specific button every single morning? New agents.
I'd be doing that every day for sure.
Yeah, they will call you and they will harass you, and eventually you'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even want to sell my house anymore. I'm so frustrated with the process." So that's one of the things that I would say is one of the biggest frustrations that people get out of it, is that they do get harassed because you're putting it out there. You're putting your phone number out there. Hey, call me. And every agent's like, okay, I'm going to do this. That's one thing that you need to be prepared for if you're looking at selling.
So I've listed some cars for sale on like Facebook and stuff. That's a headache. I can't even imagine. I didn't think about it until you said that if you're the one that's phoning all the emails and all that stuff and getting all the texts and calls, you're literally in the sales position for your house.
Correct.
And I would have to assume 90% of those texts or phone calls you're going to get are not relevant buyers at all.
Yeah, and you don't have any kind of vetting process. We have a vetting process. If somebody just calls me and they say, "Hey, I want to see this house," I'm like, "Okay, awesome. What can we do? Can you and then you go through the vetting process of, can they afford the house? Are they ready to buy the house? Are they approved? Everything like that. You can do that on yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, anybody can sell their own home. And the websites out there have made it very easy. You just have to be able to put up with all this other stuff that's going to come your way. And you're going to have a lot of people that will say, "Hey, can I come see your house?" And you're going to be like, "Yeah, come take a look at it." And then they come and take a look at it, and they're not an approved buyer. They're going to ask you about owner financing, which is going to drive you crazy because a lot of them are going to do it. And then if you do have an agent that comes in there and says, "Hey, this or that," and you're going to have, let's say you price your home correctly. If you price your home correctly, you should anticipate having 10 to 30 showings the first weekend. You're opening the door 10 to 30 times in that first weekend. Or, which is what happens most of the time, you only answer the phone to the first 5 buyers because you're treating it like selling a car. And you say, I only want to get that much for my home, which if that's all you want, perfect. But you may cost yourself money in the long run because they're going to ask you for repairs. So you only show it to the first 5 buyers because you're like, well, I don't need all these 30 buyers. I just show it to the first 5. And if somebody makes me an offer, I'm going to take that offer. Where I am going to say, if we got 30 showings, we're doing all 30.
Everybody's seeing it.
Everybody's seeing it.
Yep.
Say we end up with 5 offers. Now you have 5 offers to sit here and review. I'm going to give you the bullet points of every single offer. And then I'm going to give you my opinion and say, hey, this offer is a little bit lower than this offer, but this offer has everything else. Here's my opinion. We can take this offer, or we can go back to this offer and say, come up to this price and we'll take your offer. And now we just got you extra stuff, because normally they'll say, yes, we'll come up to that price because it's not that huge of a jump normally. And they'll come up to that price. Then you get all those extra benefits, and you got so many more offers on the table.
There's a ton more variables that go into selling a house and that offer than a car or something like that. You're not just negotiating on the price.
Correct.
There's a lot of hidden costs that go into that.
Yeah, and you still have to make it through. And that's the time is one of the biggest things that people don't realize when they're looking at these transactions is it is so much different than a car, because a car is a quick transaction. So somebody comes out, they say, hey, you have this listed for $6,500. I'm going to give you $6,500 right now. Okay, awesome. Sign on the dotted line. Here you go. They leave the parking lot. That's out of their way. In a real estate transaction, they all sign the contract. Yes, I want to pay $300,000. Okay, now we have inspections, appraisals, and everything else, and we have 30 days before you ever see your money. That's a lot of time.
It's a little bit different.
And people, I don't know how many times you've bought a car, but I've had buyer's remorse leaving the parking lot on a car. People do that on homes too. You got to make sure you vet your buyers. And I'll jump over to the not using an agent to buy a home, and then we'll wrap this up. If you're out there and you're not using an agent to buy a home, you're not saving any money. It is what it is. A lot of times, the cost of the buyer and the seller agent, if the seller's using an agent, they've already accompanied a fee or a percentage commission for a buyer's agent. Every seller's agent does it. They've already said, hey, I'm going to pay the buyer's agent so much. So people say, hey, can I get a discount if I go in here and I just use the seller's agent? Well, very well, you possibly could, but it's going to be 1%. I mean, at most 1%. So you just think about how much you're going to save there. Now, think about it this way. That seller's agent is working for the seller. So, yeah, you may save a little bit of money, but you're also working with somebody that's working for the enemy, which they're not really your enemy, but they're working for the other party. Do you want to have somebody that's going to work on your behalf? Is that worth that extra 1% on this house? Because if it is, then that's normally what the discount is. And then you have somebody that's working on your behalf that's going to coordinate everything for you that doesn't have any relationship to the other party. And that saves a lot of people a lot of money. Because if you come to me and I'm selling a house for my seller, and you say, you and I haven't signed any agreements, so I'm not representing you in any way, shape, or form. I'm representing the seller. And you say, the house is listed for $350. I'm going to offer him $325, but I'd probably go to $350, because buyers will say that to the agent. I'd probably go to $350, but I want to offer $345 just to see if they'll come down a little bit. I'm going to go back to the seller and be like, they offered you $345, but they're willing to go $350. So let's just counter them at $350. Yeah. And then you're going to end up paying that $350. It didn't save you any 1%. The only person that made money in that deal is me and the seller, because now I'm getting both sides of the transaction, whether I gave them a discount or not. And two, you're paying an extra $5,000. So you just cost yourself money. Where if you told your agent, hey, I'm willing to go to $350, but they don't have any other offers, let's offer at $345. He's going to go to the agent and say, hey, we're going to go $345. Here's our conditions. They're going to go to the seller. They're going to negotiate. The seller's going to come back and say yes, or they're going to counter, or they're going to say no. Those are the three options. But now you don't have that person that knows what you're willing to do working for the seller. That's the cost of not using an agent when you're on the buying side. There's a ton of other costs as well, like making sure that you handle the legality stuff of it. But that's a question. If you have any other questions of why you should use a buyer's agent, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to explain it and go through that process with you and hopefully help you out on your home search in the Kansas City area.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and asking me some questions so that I can get some information out there to everybody. I do believe it doesn't matter where you're buying, and whether it's in the Kansas City area, it's anywhere in Missouri. I'm licensed in the entire state of Missouri, so I can help you out anywhere. or you're buying in Kansas, Florida, Kentucky, anywhere, make sure you have somebody in your corner. Everyone needs a guy, and everyone needs somebody that's there looking out for them. And that's my biggest pitch to everybody is I've got a ton of connections. That's what, and anytime somebody asks me, hey, what do you do? I'm in the connection business. I connect buyers with sellers. I connect sellers with buyers. I connect businesses with opportunity, and I connect people with businesses. That's my big goal. That's what I'm doing here by bringing on different business owners, is so that everybody moving to the Kansas City area has somebody in their corner. And I love to make connections. So even if you're not using me and you're looking at moving to the Kansas City area, call me. I'll make a connection for you. I was down in Dallas this last weekend. I met somebody that they're up in Canada. And as soon as I was listening to him talk, I instantly thought of a guy that's in my ACA group that has an international reach or an international business program. And I'm going to connect those two later this week, because it just makes sense for them to start working together, because that's what just from the sound of it, that's what she was looking for, as well as what he promotes and gets out there. So just call and ask questions like, hey, I'm looking for this. Okay, I'll go find it. If I don't have somebody in my toolbox that does those type of things, I'll go find somebody that does, because it's going to make one, I'm probably going to have that question pop up again, and I want to have somebody there that I can trust. So I really appreciate it. If this is your first time on the channel, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, follow us, make sure you hit that little bell so you'll get notifications of our future interviews and other tips and tricks about the Kansas City area and the market. And if you really enjoyed this video, hit that like button. Thank you.